Adoptionism. Adoptionism is a theological belief that emerged in the early Christian church, particularly in the 2nd century. It is the view that Jesus of Nazareth was a human being who was adopted by God at some point in his life, either at his baptism or at his resurrection, and endowed with divine powers and attributes. The basic idea of adoptionism is that Jesus was not born divine, but rather became divine through some special action of God. Adoptionists believe that Jesus was a normal human being, born of Mary and Joseph, and that he developed a special relationship with God as he grew and matured. To understand adoptionism more deeply, let us dive into the dictionary explanation of this theological term. The emergence of adoptionism. Adoptionism emerged in the early Christian church as a way of reconciling the belief in one God with the belief in Jesus as a divine figure. Some early Christians found it difficult to accept the idea that Jesus was both fully human and fully divine, and instead believed that he must have become divine in some way. One of the earliest proponents of adoptionism was a theologian named Theodotus, who lived in the 2nd century. He believed that Jesus was a normal human being who was adopted by God at his baptism, and that he was given divine powers and attributes at that time. Other early adoptionists included Paul of Samosata and Praxeas, both of whom believed that Jesus was a human being who was later adopted by God and made divine. Adoptionism and the Trinity. Adoptionism posed a challenge to the Orthodox Christian doctrine of the Trinity, which teaches that God is one being in 3 persons: Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. According to the doctrine of the Trinity, Jesus is not a separate entity who is adopted by God, but rather is one of the 3 persons of the Godhead. Adoptionism, on the other hand, suggests that Jesus is a separate being who is adopted by God, which creates a problem for the doctrine of the Trinity. If Jesus is not a separate person within the Godhead, then how can he be adopted by God? This challenge led to the rejection of adoptionism as a heresy by the Orthodox Christian Church. In particular, the Council of Nicaea in 325 CE condemned adoptionism as a false teaching and affirmed the Orthodox doctrine of the Trinity. Modern adoptionism. While adoptionism was largely rejected by the Orthodox Christian Church, some modern theologians have revived the idea in a modified form. These theologians argue that Jesus was not divine from birth, but rather became divine through a process of spiritual development. This modified adoptionism is sometimes called functional Christology, because it focuses on the functions or roles that Jesus played rather than on his nature or essence. Proponents of this view argue that Jesus was a human being who was uniquely chosen by God to carry out a special mission on earth, and that he was endowed with divine powers and attributes to help him fulfill that mission. Conclusion. In conclusion, adoptionism is a theological belief that emerged in the early Christian church and holds that Jesus was a human being who was adopted by God at some point in his life and endowed with divine powers and attributes. While adoptionism was largely rejected by the Orthodox Christian Church as a heresy, some modern theologians have revived the idea in a modified form, arguing that Jesus became divine through a process of spiritual development. Bible verses. Matthew chapter 3:17. And a voice from heaven said, "This is my Son, whom I love, with him I am well pleased." John chapter 1:14. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. Romans chapter 8:3. For what the law was powerless to do because it was weakened by the flesh, God did by sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh to be a sin offering. Galatians chapter 4:4-5. But when the set time had fully come, God sent his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those under the law, that we might receive adoption to sonship. Hebrews chapter 1:5. For to which of the angels did God ever say, "You are my Son, today I have become your Father"?